I own 500 acres of timberland, not a small piece, not something temporary land, the kind that stretches farther than you can see from one point, trees that have been there longer than most people living nearby, and for years it stayed quiet undisturbedly. The way land like that should Bethan the HOA showed up not on my land but right next to it. They built their homes along the edge, neat roads, clean streets, perfect lines of everything, controlled everything, organized everything, designed to look like order. At first I did not think much of it. People build near land all the time. That does not change ownership, that does not change reality. But over time something shifted. They stopped acting like neighbors and started acting like authority. It started smelling noticeable tone, formal wording, talking about guidelines about how my land affected their community. It on Seth and set it aside, because it did not apply to Maybew. They did not stop. More notices came, each one stronger than the last restriction sting that sounded like orders, limits on how I could use my own land. That is when it became clear this was not about concern, this was about control. They wanted to extend their rules beyond their boundary into land they did not own, into space they had no authority over, and they were confident and confident enough to believe I would just accept it, that I would adjust complete flow rules that were never mine to follow. But I did not respond it immediately. Base reacting too early gives the other side momentum instead. I watched it, listened, let them push further, and they did. The held meetings, discuss my land like it was part of their system, like it was something they could regulate, something they could vote on. That when I knew they had gone too far, but I still waited, because the right moment matters more than the first moment. Eventually, they called a public meeting, invited residents, board members, made it official structure. At least, that is what they thought. When quiet lies it in the back, listened. They presented their case, spoke with confidence, blamed what I could not doubt had needed to change how my land should be managed, like they had already decided the outcome, like it was already settled. The room listened, some agreed, some were unsure, but most of them trusted the board, because that is what people do. They trust authority until they see a reason not to, and they finish. There was a pause, kind that comes right before something shifts. That when I stood up, no rush, no emotion, it us calmed. I walked forward, placed my documents on the table, real documents, not opinions, not assumptions, contractual deeds, legal agreements, kind that defines reality, not the kind that tries to reshape ID. Did not raise my voice, it did not argue, thus pointed line by line, clause by clause, howing exactly what they missed, what they ignored. With they never bothered to check, because the truth was sympathy had no authority over my land, not at partial, not shared, not in pleads around. Once that truth entered the room, of everything changed. Confidence at the table disappeared, tone shifted. Same people who had been speaking with certainty started hesitating. Beckus now, they were not defending rulers, they were defending a mistake. The audience felt it too. I could see it, people leaning forward, paying attention. Different labes now, they were not just listening, they were understanding. The board tried to respond, tried to explain, tried to wreck over, but you cannot argue with something that is already defined. You cannot override reality with volume. That is when the real shift happened. The room stopped seeing them as authority and started seeing them as wrong. A vote was called, quick, direct, confusion, hands when upon after another, not for control, not for enforcement, but for change. Be the time it in-depth result was clear. The same board that tried to control my land lost control of their own positions, just like that. No drama, no shouting, just consequence. They walked out the same way I walked in, can be cows. Nothing about my position had changed only theirs had. Me land stayed the same, uncontrolled and due was the way it was meant to be, because in the end they did not fail because of me. They failed because they tried to control something they never understood, and once that truth came out, everything else followed. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you are watching from.